As we have finished our series on the book of James, we're now going into about the family and home and have several lessons on that throughout the next several weeks. And it's good to talk about family and home. We know that family is the really core of our society. And when we have families working together, we have a nation that works together, and we have a church that works together. And so we're going to talk about family, and we're going to Psalm 127. And I have up here a smart home. And that may be something that you have in your home, and which would understand more about a smart home. You know, we have a smart phone that we have in our pockets, so we have these, and it's translated into a smart home. Now, what is a smart home? A smart home would be one that's controlled by your smartphone. And it is, you can open locks or have the temperature controlled if you're not there, and you say, well, listen, I'm heading home, and it's kind of hot when it's home, and so I'll just up that temperature and just do it on your phone, and you can do that. You can raise and lower blinds as it is. Whatever, most anything you want to do, you can control the temperature in your refrigerator in a smart home. And there's all kinds of things that you can do with a smart home. Isn't it wonderful? All the things that we can do and all the things that are controlled by technology when technology works. Yeah. And so when we get these glitches, it's not so much of a smart home. But it's just, you forget to lock the door. Don't worry about it. You forget to turn the oven off. Have you ever been on the trip and you say, hey, did you turn off the oven? I can't remember. Did you turn off the oven? I don't know. Do you turn around and go home? Or do you go and enjoy your vacation miserably thinking about that oven, which may or may not be on? Well, you can control that. Check it. Check it on your phone. Is the oven on or not? Turn on lights. You don't have to get up and go over there and turn on lights. You can just get your phone, turn on a light. Or back when I was growing up, you wanted a light turned on, you went like that, right? Just clap your hands. Some of you know what I'm talking about. Some of you don't. That's all right. You've got a smartphone and a smart home. You can do it through your phone. It's just something that is where we are today. A smart home. Well, we want to look at a smart home according to what the Bible talks about a home. And it's more than a house, even though it's called a house or it's called a city in Psalm 127. It's really a home. Unless the Lord builds the house, as we said, they labor in vain that build it. And so there's certain things that we're going to look at in Psalm 127, talking about the home and having the home together and having the home as God would have it. Because you see, God is the architect of the home. And we've got, our daughter Jessica's going to build a home, and they've got blueprints for that home. And so they have somewhat an idea of what that home is going to look like when it is built, if they follow the blueprints. And so God has set us some blueprints of what the home ought to look like, and if we follow that, it should be according to God's way. And so it is. We're going to look at our home and talk about that. God Himself talks about building the house or the home or the city. Psalm 127. Now I'm going to start with that which is in bold first of all. You may have a song of degrees or a song of ascents, a heading up, and as the children of Israel would go toward Jerusalem, all the children of Israel would go to Jerusalem at least 3 times a year for feast. And it was a calling together of the Jewish nations. And they would go to Jerusalem, and at this particular time, that as they would go and they would sing 15 psalms, and those are called the songs of degrees or songs of ascents, as they would head toward Jerusalem. And so it's a coming in. One of these talks about the family. And so family is important as the family goes together and worships in Jerusalem. You had the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the Feast of Weeks, the Feast of Booths, and as they would go and make this journey toward Jerusalem, these 3 times a year, they would sing songs, and as other pilgrims were coming and other Jews were coming and joining their group as they go along, the song would grow and people would sing together in singing these songs. And one of these was Psalm 127. It's Psalm 120 through 134, those 15 psalms. Before each psalm, you'll see a song of degree or the psalm of ascents. And so they were singing these psalms as they would head their way. When they got to the temple, they had, the temple is divided, and we talked about the book of Psalms and the temple and such. You had the court of the Gentiles, and you had the court of women, and you had the court of men, and then you had where the priest would go and dwell. And so as they would go enter into the court of the women, they would sing these psalms together as all the pilgrims would go there and make their journey toward the temple. Well, on the temple steps, they had 15 steps, and they had 15 psalms. And you had the priests, which were singers. There were some of the priests that offered sacrifice, and some of the priests were singers. And the priests who were singers would stand on these steps, and as you ascended the psalms of ascent, as you ascended these steps, the priests would sing these psalms together. Some of the psalms they would sing in unison. Some of those they'd sing, the priest on this side would sing, and then the priest on this side would answer. And I was thinking about the song that we sang, I Will Call Upon the Lord, where we have some sing a part, and then some would answer a part. And that's kind of how it went, although it's not quite, but it's almost like that, where they would sing, and then they would answer on the psalms. But as you went up these steps, and the steps up to the temple were 200 feet wide. And so it's just not narrow steps like this. 200 feet wide, where the Jews could ascend up toward the temple, singing the songs together, praising God as a family and as a nation together to go up to worship in the temple. And so it's important to kind of see that this is a psalm of degree, or a psalm of ascents. And so you're singing in several things, but one of these is singing about the family. Family is important to God. Family is the foundation of society. And as the family goes, society goes. And as our nation goes. Well, I'm not here speaking as an expert on raising your family. I raised my 2 girls. They're doing good. I'm glad they're out of the house. Yeah, that's a good thing. They grow up. We did the best we could with them, we were not perfect as families. And I thought Jessica may amen that, but she didn't. I was waiting for a minute. We were not perfect, but we just do the best we can, and we have a blueprint to go about following and raising our children. Now, our oldest daughter, Jana, was good about keeping a journal and writing certain things, and she wrote certain things about me and Julie in that journal whenever we did bad parenting. She'd go to her journal, write that thing down. I'm not going to do that when I'm a parent. Yeah. And so we had that journal. I haven't seen that journal. I haven't read that journal. But you know what? She's raising her own 3 kids right now. And Julie and I would pray for our girls as they were growing up and such. And one of the most frequent prayers offered got answered with our oldest daughter. And that prayer was, I hope you have a child just like you. And that prayer was answered. And now she is raising a child. Her oldest child is so much like Jana, and so many times when we are over there, we just almost have to turn away and laugh because what he is doing is exactly what she was doing. And now she has to see how she's going to deal with that. I'd like to see her go to that journal and see, have a perfect way to answer that now. Oh boy, she's getting her payback. But we go and we read about just doing parenting the best that we can. I mean, we're going to have a little series through that. What does the Bible say about family and parenting and how we treat one another and raising our children? And once they're grown also, they're still our children, and we understand that part. And dealing with that. And so as we look at Psalm 127, before we read that, I'm going to just give you our outline. It's the designer and the builders and the dwellers and the enjoyers. 4 parts we're going to look at. Number 1 is the designer. It is God. It is a poem, really, a psalm, a song, written about the family. And the designer is God about the family. Except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. And so we must first focus on that it is the Lord. And if you have in your Bible such as this, Lord is all capitalized here in Psalm 127. It means the Lord above all lords. It's just not a master, it's just not a Lord, it is the Lord. It is the creator of all universe and the creator of man and the creator of family. See, family is a God-ordained institution. God's idea of family. When we have a series on the church is a God-ordained institution. And church must be the way that God plans for it to be. And so family must be the way that God plans for it to be. It's a God-ordained institution. And so since God ordained it, we have a blueprint of what God has designed the church to be. And that's important. Throughout this series, it's important to remember that God is the architect, the designer of the blueprints for family. Man is not the designer and the architect of family. If man were the designer, family could be whatever man wants it to be. Man could manipulate it or change it or have, say, family is this way or family is that way according to generation. And it could move in and out of definition of what family would be, much like man is trying to make it today. Man's trying to change the definition and change the blueprint of what family is. But man is not the author of family. It's not a man-ordained institution. It's a God-ordained institution. We'll look at that. Except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. And so man does not regulate what family is. Man does not define what family is. Man does not manipulate what family is. It is God's plan, and we must follow God's plan if we want our family to be as God intended it to be. And I think that's our purpose today. We want our families to be as God intended it for it to be. And there's a lot of the world saying about family and what family is and what family ought to be and what family is to society and such. And it changes and rotates and revolves as far as man's definition. But man is not the designer. God is. God who made a covenant with Adam and Eve. He's a God of covenant. And it's more than just a piece of paper. You say, well, what difference does a piece of paper make? Well, it's a marriage which is a covenant in the sight of the Lord. So there are 2 ways to build a home. We can build a smart home. A smart home is one that follows God's design. A smart home is one that says we want to do what the Bible says about being a husband or a wife or a mother or a father or children in a home. And we'll talk about that in a series. A smart one follows the blueprint. And then you have a not so smart home which does not follow the blueprint. It says we'll design our home any way that we want to design our home. We're not going to follow the blueprint. And you have people today building their homes not following the blueprint. And so you have the designer as God. Then the builders. It says, except the Lord build the house. Well, why do I put builders and God and us? Well, first of all, God is involved in building the home. Certainly ought to be with every home represented here. God ought to be in the home. In the home as we design the home, in the home as we build the home, in the home as we continue building the home. It's not finished. It's a continual process. except the Lord build the house, now the they is not talking about the Lord, is it? They labor in vain that build it. And so you have the Lord building the house, and then you have the they building the house, which is us. They're called builders. They are called watchmen. They are called laborers. And that's us. We build the house. We labor for the house. We watch over the house. We have our part in building the house. Isn't it something? Except the Lord build the house. Now God has His part in building the house. And then you have the part of the they, the watchmen and the builders and the laborers. It's a coming together of us and God and building together with things. 2 Corinthians 6 verse 1, Paul would say something about working with God. He said, we then as workers together with Him. Paul was talking about his labor in evangelism. Workers together with Him. And we have workers together with Him in building the home also. Building our house, home, family. We do our part, He does His part. In Philippians chapter 2, verse 12, we read where Paul would say, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling, for it is God who works in us. And so we have our part, God working in us, and then He tells us, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. Philippians 2, 12 and 13. And so God has His part in salvation, and we have our part in salvation. And so God has His part in building the home, and we have our part in building the home. I've heard a little phrase lately. It goes something like this. It says, let go and let God. And that's a nice little saying, but that doesn't work for the home. Because we don't let go. That God is involved, but we are involved also. We are the builders, and we are the laborers, and we are the watchmen. We've got our part in the home. And so God has His part, and we have our part. What are we building? When we talk about building, except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. We're not building a house of brick or wood or mortar. We understand that part. You know what we're building? We're building relationships. That's the home. We're building a relationship between husband and wife, and we're building a relationship between parent and children. That's what we're building. And always remember, when we're talking about this series of lessons, we're building relationships. Someone set it up like this as far as the triangle of marriage. And as a husband and wife are on one end, and they have their part, and it is that they have a relationship with one another, and we have a relationship with God. And so this triangle represents that the closer the husband and wife get to God, the closer they get to each other. And that's a wonderful illustration, something to remember, that the closer we get to God, as we have this triangle, the closer we get to each other. We're building relationships. And it starts with a relationship, and you fall in love with someone, and you say, I know that person, I want to spend the rest of my life with that person, and then you really get to know them, don't you? You really get to see who they are. You build your relationships. It doesn't just happen. Wish that it would just happen. You get married, and it just happens, and everything is wonderful, and everything is glorious, and everything is just, you're on your honeymoon for 30, 40, 50, 60 years. But it's work. You're building a relationship. You're laboring for a relationship. You're a watchman over that relationship. And we've got a responsibility to do, and we need to have our homes and our families the way that God would have us to have them. And so we are the builders with God along with that. Now let's look at the dwellers. Who is it that makes up the home? And so he talks about the children. And he talks about, go to the next slide. Lo, children are a heritage of the Lord. And so there are children involved in this home that's being built. Children are a heritage of the Lord. Children are a blessing from the Lord. Children are something special from the Lord. Children are not an accident. Children are not an inconvenience. Children are not a curse. Children are a heritage from the Lord. And I know sometimes when we would read this, and if you've got a little baby that's crying in the night, and you're saying, how can this be a blessing from the Lord whenever I have to get up 2 or 3 times in the night? Or maybe it is that little child who was so sweet when they were little all of a sudden becomes a teenager. Right? And you say, you have to remember, children are a blessing from the Lord, a reward from the Lord. Yes. But when they have grandchildren, oh yes, that's different, isn't it? That's a blessing from the Lord. That's that reward for not killing your children when they're teenagers, right? And you get grandchildren. Children are an heritage from the Lord, a great blessing. Someone wrote a commentary on this and said, children are an assignment from the Lord. Now think about that. That He has given us children, and that we have a responsibility or an assignment with these children. And we have a purpose with these children that God has blessed our home with. That we are to raise them in the nurture and admonition of the Lord, Ephesians chapter 6. And we're going to talk about the book of Proverbs and raising children and some problems that we have. Sometimes we have problem children, sometimes we have problem parents, and sometimes we just have problems that come up. But we deal with this. And we remember through all this that children are an heritage of the Lord, or great blessing. As they are the fruit of the womb is His reward. And so He rewards us with children. Now, so we have children in this home. And we have the fruit of the womb. Now, who is it that has a womb? Well, that's the woman. And so we have a woman and we have a wife in this marriage relationship, this home relationship. That we have the dwellers of it. We have children and we have a wife, a woman. You know, we hear about all these which are not male and female. I read one time we have some 26 genders. Male, female are just 2 of those. That's not God's blueprint for the home. And He has one who has the womb is part of this home. And the one who bears children is one who part of this home. And so we have the woman. It is her part. God just has 2 genders in a home, male and female. He says, happy is the man that has his quiver full of them. And so you have the children, the woman, the man, and the Lord. For the Lord builds a house. When we have that, when we have a striving together of the Lord working through a home, working to do God's purpose, and we'll talk more about God's purpose, is to dwell with Him forever in heaven. And we have this together. God's involvement. God's involvement in the home is not regulated to Sunday morning at 10 o'clock. When God is in the home, He's in the home all the time. It's not just a Sunday morning thing. Sunday morning you get up and you say, let's go worship. Let's go have God be a part of our family. Let's go and be a part of the church. We'll have the church as part of our family. We'll meet with our church family. We'll worship God. And we'll enjoy this time, this hour together. And then we will leave, and we'll leave God out of our home from here on out to the rest of the week until next Sunday morning, right? And that's not God's plan and God's blueprint for family. And God is in our home. the whole home, the whole house, 24 hours a day. He's with us. What sort of wife would marry a man who said, "Now listen, I'm a be here 1 hour on Sunday morning, and I'll be a good, faithful husband during that hour, but the rest of the week is mine, and I'm going to leave the house, and I'm going to leave the children, and I'm going to enjoy my life and live it the way that I want it to, but I'll see you next Sunday morning at 10 o'clock." Right. That wouldn't work, would it? Wouldn't work with any family member. You don't leave the family. Such it is with the Lord also. Remember the Lord is part of the family, the dweller. And then we would see the enjoyers. Happy is the man that has his quiver full of them. Happy, some of you may have the word blessed there. It's just not that he goes around happy all the time. Got a smile on his face. He's just happy all the time. Everything's well. Everything's good. Everything went well with the house and the home. And no, it's not that type of happiness. But it is where he is blessed. And it's a great blessing. Not just talking about man. He's talking about mankind with this. Happy is the man that has her quiver full of them. He talks about his children. He's happy to talk about his children. Happy to talk about his family. Even to his enemies, he would be happy to talk to them. Got a good family. Good wife. Good children. Or the wife would say, got a good husband. Good children. Or the children would say, I've got a good mom. Good dad. I like them. I like spending time with them. So we talk about the family. The designer is God. God gives us a little insight in Psalm 127. When the family would come together to go into the temple to worship, and the family would sing this psalm together. Now think about that. What a binding moment it is whenever the family would go and sing a psalm about, except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. Talk about the precious fruit that comes from the womb and the mother's part in the family and the father's part, that happy is he that has his quiver full. And he would sing along with his children and looking at his children and just enjoying that, say, I'm so happy to have you as part of this family. Parents, have we told our children, I'm so happy you're a part of this family? You may not say it like that. We don't speak like that. I'm so happy you're a part of this family. But have you said, I'm so proud of you? What would that mean to children, for parents to say, I'm so proud of you? I'm so proud of the way that you interact and growing up, and I see the change that you're making in year after year. I'm just so happy for you. So proud of you. To express that, to say, I love you, care for you. Happy is the man that has his quiver full. So we're building a relationship. Husband, wife, children. We'll talk more about that through the next couple of weeks, and about the family and having the family as God would have it to be, because God does have a plan for family. God does have a blueprint for family. God does not say, hey, you're on your own raising your children. He's got a book. It doesn't have all the answers. We still have questions. We still deal with situations which are unique to family situations. Maybe not answered in this, but what is answered is, where's your foundation? Is the foundation upon this book? Do we have a firm foundation? Except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. We'll talk about the house. We'll talk about our labor. We'll talk about our building in the next couple of weeks. I hope you join us and invite your friends. There's so many questions about the family. So many wondering about what about now and all that we're dealing with in this world, and how does the Bible help us? Can it help us? Good questions. Join us next week as we talk about the family and if it can help us and strengthen our families. Talking about our physical family, but our spiritual family is here also. And some of the principles, except the Lord build the house for our spiritual family, we labor in vain that build it also. And so if, as a family together, we're glad you're here. We appreciate you coming. You could have made a lot of different choices today of where you would be and what you were doing, but you decided, I want to be with family. I want to come together and see my family. I want to come together and worship God. And as a family, if there's anything that we can do to help you and strengthen you, encourage you, maybe privately you're making some commitments, but publicly, if you need some help publicly, you say, I need prayers from the elders, from the church. I need encouragement from, maybe you're going through a situation and maybe someone else here has been through a similar situation that they can help you with. Whether it's concerning the family or spiritual life growth, if we can help you in any way, won't you respond to the gospel invitation right now while we stand and while we sing?